After 10 years of marriage, Alan achieved great success thanks to me. But he resented me to the core. After my death, he took over my family's company and married his childhood sweetheart. On their wedding day, Felix, who had once pledged a childhood engagement with me and later became my rival, set off an explosion at the wedding ceremony. As the flames engulfed everything, Felix smiled and said, "She's dead, leaving you all happy together." Where in the world does such a good thing exist? When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back 10 years ago. I grabbed Alan and went to the day when Felix asked me to break off the engagement. He looked at me indifferently and asked, "Have you thought it through? Do you really want to divorce me for him, Winnie? I never regret anything." A familiar cold male voice sounded as I was still reeling from the aftermath of the explosion. The overwhelming colors of fire seemed to burn even my ethereal soul floating in midair. Felix, holding a gun, stood in the midst of the flames and pulled the trigger. Facing Alan's mixed reaction of shock and anger, he smiled and said, "She's dead, leaving you all happy together." Where in the world does such a good thing exist? At that moment, the invisible shackles on me suddenly dissipated. Something new dawned on me. It turned out that in my past life, I was the malicious second female lead in a romance novel. I had set my eyes on the male protagonist, Alan, who was a poor student, and coerced him using his mother's medical expenses. He accepted my assistance and started a relationship with me. Alan felt I had humiliated him by using money and harbored resentment towards me for many years. After we got married, he conspired with others to take over my family's company while having a clandestine relationship with his childhood sweetheart. In the end, he slowly drove me insane, had me sent to a mental hospital, watched me fall to my death, and then transformed himself into a rising tycoon, marrying his true love. Finally, I understood. Felix and I had always been inseparable since childhood. Why is it that in my past life, the moment Alan appeared, I suddenly fell in love with him inexplicably, losing my mind in the process? As I came to my senses, I looked around and saw the different expressions on both sets of parents. Sitting on the sofa, with a cold and stern gaze, was Felix, looking up at me slightly. Suddenly, it all came back to me. In my past life, it was today that I completely severed ties with Felix. Our families were longtime acquaintances, and today was supposed to be a customary day for both families to come together. But I showed up late, and I even brought Alan along. Without hesitation, I was about to break off the engagement with Felix, saying, "I never liked you, and besides, I already have a boyfriend now." "So, are you here to divorce me because of him?" Felix pushed up the golden-rimmed glasses on his nose. His gaze fell on Alan beside me, with undisguised disdain. Alan straightened his back and retorted, "What are you so proud of? You're just born into a slightly better family." "Slightly better?" Felix smirked, pulling out a mocking smile. "You'd better understand, if it weren't for Winnie bringing you here, you wouldn't even have the right to speak in front of me." This remark struck at Alan's fragile self-esteem, hurting him deeply. I remembered how in my past life, I watched him humiliated to the point of tears, which pained me. I immediately stood in front of him, lashing out at Felix without holding back. I accused him of being delusional and persistent. "Don't think I don't know that the high school boy who wrote me love letters mysteriously had his leg broken in a car accident was that you're doing, Felix? You're despicable, just by being slightly better off. What else do you have that can compare to Alan?" I said many harsh words, but Felix remained silent, without uttering a single word in response. He sat there in silence, as if he had turned into a solid statue. After a while, he pressed the frame of his glasses and calmly said, "Okay, I agree to divorce." Alan turned around coldly. "Winnie, did you bring me here just to humiliate me?" I gripped my hands tightly, trying to detach my mind from the chaos of just being reborn. Upon hearing this, I suddenly laughed. Humiliate? Felix was simply stating facts. "Someone like you, just a passing fancy for me, is he worth the trouble of explaining to him?" "You are really overestimating yourself, Alan." As soon as I said that, the whole living room fell into a sudden silence. Everyone looked at me in surprise. Sitting a couple of steps away on the sofa, Felix suddenly lifted his head. Behind the lenses were a pair of fragile and translucent eyes, with a hint of unrevealed astonishment. "What did you say?" Alan's expression turned extremely embarrassed. I said, "Do you really think you can compare to my fiancé?" He always ignores me when talking business, so to spite him, I needed to make you angry, that's all. I let go of his hand, took a step back as if avoiding something dirty. "After issuing the eviction order, now you can leave." Alan looked at me in disbelief. However, he was escorted out by the alert butler. Before leaving, he threatened, "Winnie, I am not someone you can summon and dismiss at will. Even if you kneel before me and beg, I will not reconcile with you." He was so self-confident. But at this moment, I had no time to think about Alan. I took small steps and ran to Felix, crouching down beside him. In my previous life, I only found out a long time after the divorce that Felix had been admitted to the hospital that evening. He had sat on the sofa without getting up, as his stomachache worsened while he was on a business trip abroad. But because he really wanted to see me, he had rushed back despite his health. And the moment I saw him, I announced the decision to divorce. When our eyes met, a hint of understanding suddenly flashed in Felix's eyes. He chuckled mockingly, "Trying to make your boyfriend jealous again?" Indeed, in my past, I had tried to make Alan jealous by provoking Felix in a foolish attempt to prove he cared about me. Now I had no choice but to soften my voice and feign ignorance. "What boyfriend?" "Felix, you are my only fiancé." He looked down at me. "I am feeling unwell. Can you accompany me to the hospital?" Suddenly, Felix furrowed his brows. "Where does it hurt?" "Are you having menstrual cramps again?" Without thinking, I replied, "Yes, menstrual cramps." He glanced at me sideways. "But today isn't your period." Due to the ongoing Cold War between Alan and me, I hadn't expected him to remember my menstrual cycle. A surge of sour emotions filled my heart. "It just came early," I said, grasping his sleeve carefully. "I need to get a pain relief injection. Will you come with me, please?" Felix remained silent for a moment and then calmly replied, "Okay." I called the driver over and insisted that Felix should not drive. Without any objections, he sat beside me in the back seat with a person's distance between us. I asked softly, "Felix, are you mad at me?" He slightly curved his lips, almost in a self-mocking manner. "I wouldn't dare to be." This sentence drowned my heart in a flood of guilt and regret. Controlled by the storyline in the past, my parents couldn't persuade me, and I ended up marrying Alan to support his company with our family's assets, as he and Felix were always in competition over projects, with me viewing Felix as a rival. In those 10 years of our previous life, the few times I met Felix were always filled with cold words and indifference, without a hint of friendliness. "Felix," I sniffed, suddenly speaking up, "after 2 months without seeing each other, did you miss me?" Felix glanced at me but remained silent. Feeling a bit awkward, I said, "You didn't bring me any gifts this time you came back." "Last time you did. But you thought my things were filthy and threw them away." After that cold remark, Felix turned his head, closed his eyes. Thinking about how, in the past, I smashed the box of rubies Felix brought for me in front of Alan to make him happy, I closed my eyes in despair. I cursed the original plot for being so stupid. Without a 10-year build-up, they couldn't craft such a ridiculous storyline. In reality, I tried to reduce the distance between us by inching closer to Felix. I leaned towards him, pressing my chin on his shoulder, and softly said, "Actually, Felix, there is something I need to tell you." A warm breath escaped my lips, carrying a slight breeze that gently brushed his scattered hair by his ear. Suddenly, Felix opened his eyes, grabbed the back of my neck, and pulled me aside. "Whatever act you're putting on with Alan today, I'm not interested. Stop wasting your efforts." He paused slightly, furrowing his brows. "And, if you're feeling unwell, don't move around." As he scolded me, his face stern and cold, I noticed that his earlobes were flushed, and he adjusted his sitting posture awkwardly. I tentatively called out to him, "Felix, are you?" He cut me off sternly, "You sit properly." He lowered his eyelashes, concealing the surging desires in his eyes, his voice slightly hoarse, "You don't need to worry about me." When the car stopped at the hospital entrance, the icy and tense atmosphere between us had eased a little. Remembering how Felix had endured the pain of his stomachache just to see me, I looped my arm through his, leaning on him. Suddenly, a sweet voice full of anger came from the side, "Winnie." I turned around to see Stella rushing towards me, glaring at me angrily. "You did it on purpose, didn't you? You intentionally made Auntie miss her medicine just to force Alan to submit to you." She looked past me, her eyes suddenly red. "You said before that as long as I disappeared, you would ask that senior oncologist to come out and treat Auntie. Are you going back on your word now?" "Stella." Alan stepped forward quickly from behind me, pulling Stella protectively behind him. With furrowed brows and a lowered voice, he said meekly, "Winnie, it's all my fault. I won't be mad at you for what you did to me today. Please don't make things difficult for Stella and my mom." It suddenly dawned on me. In my past life, the specialist who treated Alan's mother was only brought in through Felix's connections. It's not. I hadn't had a chance to speak when my arms suddenly felt empty. Felix withdrew his arm from mine, lowered his eyes, and chuckled mockingly. His gaze carried a sense of understanding and bone-chilling coldness. "No wonder you suddenly asked me to take you to the hospital. Winnie, is this what you wanted to tell me?" Felix's face, which seemed sharp and cold yet fragile like shattered glass, was all too familiar to me. In my past life, every time I confronted Alan for the sake of Alan, he would look at me like this. At that time, I was so focused on Alan that I was bound by the original plot. I found Felix's pretentious behavior annoying. But now, my heart ached, and I subconsciously retorted, "No." He no longer looked at me, but coldly stared at Alan. "If you look down on me, then show some real ability. Using even the treatment of your own mother to involve my fiancé in this act, don't you feel ashamed?" Alan clenched his fists, a flash of humiliation crossing his eyes. "Felix, don't think you're so great. One day, you will pay for what you said today." Ignoring Alan, Felix walked away without looking back. I was about to follow him, but Alan grabbed me. "Winnie." He looked at me with lowered eyes, his voice slightly hoarse. "Winnie, it's all my fault. Please don't be angry." As his chilling fingers gripped my wrist, memories of the past flooded back, and I felt a cold, poisonous snake creeping up. "Don't touch me." Disgusting, I pushed him away, catching him off guard. Clearly, he was incredulous. After all, in the past, no matter how angry I was, as long as he softened his stance, I would concede endlessly. "Winnie." He tried to say something, but I cut him off forcibly. "If you've always felt humiliated by me spending money, transfer the $60,000 I spent on treating your mom to my account within 3 days. I ran in my high heels and finally caught up with Felix at the hospital door. "Felix!" I grabbed his sleeve, panting. Before I could speak, he turned his head. "Winnie, there may be some lingering feelings between us. But that doesn't mean you can use it to make me unconditionally compromise for your little boyfriend." After saying this coldly, he tried to pull his sleeve back, but I held on tightly. "It has nothing to do with him, all right, I admit, I didn't come to the hospital for menstrual cramps. I brought you here because your stomach trouble has recurred, hasn't it? Don't think I don't know. You don't eat properly when you're out discussing business." He looked at me in surprise, trying to discern the truth from my expression. Seeing his slight change in expression, I continued dragging him into the consultation room. The doctor, holding his test report, frowned. "Chronic gastritis requires special attention to diet, especially during discomfort. Don't force yourself, come to the hospital as soon as possible. Let's start with 4 fluids for 2 days." Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a thorough glance into the room. When it was just Felix and me left in the ward, the air suddenly quieted. I bought him some porridge and blew it cool with a small spoon before feeding it to him. Felix lowered his lashes, lost in thought. The doctor said he should eat something, or his stomach would feel uncomfortable during the 4 infusion. I reminded him, and finally, he looked up at me. His eyes shimmered in the sunlight. "Okay," he muttered softly, finally opening his mouth. After finishing half the bowl of porridge, Felix gestured for me to put it down. "My phone," he said. I handed him the phone with a puzzled look, watching him input a string of numbers. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a doctor's number, the oncologist you've been wanting to bring on board," he replied with a faint smile, his face slightly pale. Suddenly, I understood. He always thought I had ulterior motives. "You drove me to the hospital, and I gave you what you wanted, so now you don't owe me anything. I don't want the next time you come begging for his sake, to bring up today's events and say you feel disgusted just by seeing me eat porridge. Winnie, I'm human too." The slanting sunlight spread a rare vulnerability over his stern gaze, making my chest ache, leaving me speechless. Felix's words, I remember them. 3 months ago, Alan's studio wanted to get a project that Felix was the decision maker for. So I went to persuade him, cooked him a meal, and brought a gift. Just when Felix was happy, I asked him, "Could you please consider giving the project to Alan's team?" The smile on Felix's lips almost faded in an instant. He put down his chopsticks and looked at me. "So, are you here today to see me or for your boyfriend?" "Alan is really capable." I tried to argue, but he interrupted me with a cold voice, saying that capable people don't need to rely on connections to win projects. "Go back, I have already seen the proposal and made a decision. I won't choose him." Felix stood up, pulled out a chair, and gave me the cold shoulder. I lost my temper and pointed at him, cursing, "If not for Alan, I wouldn't even want to see you. Just seeing you eat the meal I made makes me disgusted." In a blur, a hand suddenly reached out and wiped away the moisture from the corner of my eye. It was then that I realized I was crying. Felix retracted his hand and said softly, "No need to feel wronged. After today, I won't bother you again. Winnie, we are now even." It's normal that he doesn't trust me. While trying to convince myself in my mind, I held back my tears and looked at Felix seriously. "I'm sorry." He looked puzzled for a moment. "Relationships cannot be forced, no need to apologize. I will explain things to my parents after leaving the hospital today. We'll call off the engagement." Before he could finish his sentence, I startled him with a sudden kiss. Felix widened his eyes in disbelief as I awkwardly lingered on his lips for a while before pulling back slightly, breathing lightly while tugging at his collar. "No, you can't mention calling off the engagement." Gathering my thoughts, I continued, "Felix, whether you believe it or not, the things related to Alan before were not what I wanted to do. I brought you to the hospital only because I saw that you were unwell and I was concerned about your health." He looked down at me, emotions swirling in his eyes covered by long eyelashes, almost indiscernible. "Is this your new tactic?" Suppressing a pang in my heart, I said, "As long as I have known you for all these years we've been alive, you can't not trust me. And if you don't believe me, I'll kiss you again," I said, moving closer. But Felix raised his hand to my forehead to stop me in time. With his breath so close, inches away from me, his voice slightly hoarse, "Winnie, do you know what you're doing right now?" I replied, "Yes, I know, doing what we did when we were 18. This sentence was like igniting a fuse that burned away all of the rationality between Felix and me in an instant. The night of the college entrance examination celebration, my family held a special banquet for me. After drinking a few glasses of champagne, I dragged Felix drunkenly into the room. I asked him, "What does it feel like to kiss someone?" He looked at me calmly, "Winnie, you're drunk." I was a little upset. "Don't change the subject. If you don't tell me, I'll find someone else." Before I could finish my sentence, Felix suddenly pinched my chin and leaned in to kiss me. A faint lemongrass scent emanated from him. It was like the gift I gave him for his birthday this year. His lips and the touch of his fingertips on my neck were scorching hot. dizzy in my head. I soon only had the strength to grab his front shirt, enduring the overwhelming heat that followed. Felix's voice carried a hint of desire. This is what kissing feels like. Do you want to go further, Winnie? Back then, we were so good together, so intimate. I always thought that after graduating from college, I would marry Felix. But after enrolling in school, I met Alan and was immediately drawn into the whirlpool of the original plot. Why on earth would he pull out the needle while lying in the hospital room? The nurse came to reinsert the needle for Felix and then said worriedly, "Don't move around, there's one more drip to go." Felix nodded calmly. It was me sitting by his side who sheepishly apologized. "I'm sorry." I was so engaged in the kiss that I accidentally shifted the intravenous needle in Felix's arm, causing the blood to soak through a patch of gauze. He looked at me. "No need to apologize. Do you believe me now? It's up to your performance." Although he said this, his tone had already softened slightly. Towards the end of the month, Felix left for a business trip to a neighboring city. I went back to school to attend classes, but didn't forget to message him. I wanted to prove to him that my heart belonged only to him. Felix's birthday was approaching, so one afternoon, I decided to go to the mall to pick a gift for him. Suddenly, from a distance, I saw a familiar figure. It was Alan. Since we had a serious talk in the hospital, he hadn't contacted me for days. Initially, I felt relieved. But now, in the midst of a busy studio schedule, he was following a young man into a garden restaurant on the side. My heart clenched as I took a few steps forward. As they entered, the man happened to look up. It was like a thunderbolt striking me, and I froze in place. This man was none other than Peter, from our previous life, who collaborated with Alan to maneuver Felix and our family into a desperate situation. I followed them discreetly, hiding behind some green plants, and overheard their conversation. Felix was already on a business trip, seemingly unaware of any issues with the project. The project? Alan sneered, his voice cold. "I want more than just his company, I want his life." In our previous life, I often found it strange. Felix came from a wealthy family and was the most outstanding child of his generation. At 20, he pursued an MBA at the most prestigious business school and then took over his family's company. Why did someone like Felix lose to Alan repeatedly, eventually having most of the family business taken over by him? Did he possess some special information? What was that project they were discussing? Countless questions swirled in my mind. I wanted to ask Felix about it, but I feared that he would confront Alan prematurely, pushing the narrative towards a dangerous outcome, leading Felix toward his destined conclusion. Ultimately, I decided to gather information through Alan to prevent Felix from falling into danger due to the original script. When I returned home, I had the nanny stew some soup and brought it to the hospital. As expected, I bumped into Alan in the ward. He gave me a cold glance and remained silent. I approached him in a subdued manner and tugged at his sleeve. Trying to recall my previous arrogant yet vulnerable tone, I asked, "You're not still mad at me, right? I feel aggrieved too. You promised me that you wouldn't have any contact with Stella anymore." But when I came to the hospital, she was still there, screaming at me. "Who does she think she is?" A hint of disgust flashed in Alan's eyes, but he quickly concealed it. "I've already asked her to leave," he said calmly. "She came over that day out of concern for my mom's health, and she won't be coming back. That's for the best. Don't forget that I am your girlfriend." These days, I asked Felix, and he said he would help to bring in the expert and get your aunt the surgery. But we have to wait. There have been some issues with a project Alan has been thinking of investing in. Alan cleared his throat and suddenly turned to me. "What kind of issues?" I pretended to rack my brain. "It seems to be related to something in the suburbs." For the rest of the day, Alan's attitude towards me suddenly became much warmer. He kept hinting at me, trying to find out if Felix knows something. And I acted like I wanted to patch things up with him, finally ending up at a dinner with Peter and others that he took me to. Before heading out, I felt a bit guilty, so I called Felix, but his phone was off. After some hesitation, I decided not to miss this opportunity. In a private room with excellent privacy, Peter raised his glass to me. "Winnie, I am interested in investing in Alan's studio." "I'm Peter. Maybe we'll have a chance to collaborate in the future." I thought back to a past life where he helped Alan destroy half of Felix's industry while swallowing up my family's business. I had to hold back my disgust and pretend to be polite to him. After a few rounds of drinks, he casually mentioned, "I heard your families are old friends. Winnie and Felix were also engaged." "What engagement?" "It's just something the parents talk about." He always gives Alan a hard time, and I resent him for that. I looked at Alan, realizing I've only ever liked one person from childhood to now, and that's Alan. If it weren't for Alan, I wouldn't have to pretend to be nice to him. While saying these words, all I could think about were Alan and Peter's faces. My displayed hatred seemed so authentic and bone-chilling that everyone in the room burst into laughter. "Winnie really has a sharp eye, seeing through the fake gentleman facade of Felix," Peter said with a grin as he approached me. "So, can you tell me if he's really on a business trip?" Feeling intoxicated, I stood up, feeling a bit dizzy. "Sorry, my stomach isn't feeling well. I need to go to the restroom." Clicking on my high heels, I walked to the door and opened it. A gust of cold wind mixed with a faint scent of lemongrass blew in. The light illuminated the familiar handsome face in front of me with a thin layer. I shuddered, suddenly becoming wide awake. Felix stood expressionless at the doorway, and upon seeing me, he faintly curled his lips. "Winnie, so it's like that." The warm yellow light in the corridor was cold when cast upon Felix's face. He heard it all. In the mixed sense, I suddenly grabbed a thread of chaotic thoughts. The rising intoxication dissipated instantly. I trembled as I grasped the door handle. Feeling uneasy and called out unconsciously, "Felix." With a look of disappointment and coldness, he glanced over. Looking beyond my shoulder, his gaze landed on Alan and Peter behind me. "Want to know what I do when I'm away on a business trip, but too afraid to ask me directly?" He chuckled lightly, his voice now carrying a sharp and decisive edge. "Do you think planting a few moles in the company can influence my judgment? Your methods are as laughable as you are." Already tall, he now stood straight, looking down upon the others with a visible air of disdain. "Clown," he said as he turned and left. Inside the private room, Alan's expression darkened, and he suddenly knocked over a plate. "What are you so proud of? Do you think these are my only methods? One day, I will watch him die in front of me." I felt like slapping him, but couldn't afford to be careless, reminding myself of the original plot. Reluctantly forcing a smile, I said, "I'll go back with Felix first and find out what he discovered." After saying that, I grabbed my bag and left. I chased after Felix down to the ground floor and saw him getting into his car. "Felix!" I gasped for breath, hastily speaking, "Listen to me, I came here today to find out what schemes Alan has against you." Through the partially open car window, I met Felix's calm, unwavering gaze, and my voice suddenly faltered. He raised a hand, nonchalantly supporting his chin, as if listening to an amusing joke. He even curved his lips, lightly laughing. "Are you going to say that it's because you care about me, worried about my safety? And afraid I can't handle them alone?" The boundless anxiety and panic were like foam on the sea, rising up from the depths of my heart. I pinched my palm, forcing myself to focus and explain sincerely, "Yes, I know you don't believe me, but Alan is not as simple as you think. If his methods were as shallow as they seem, I wouldn't either." "Winnie," Felix suddenly interrupted me. Through the gradually closing car window, I saw his eyes seem shattered yet still beautiful. "You cannot rely on my love for you to keep deceiving me endlessly. We should not contact each other in the future." After saying this, the car window closed completely, cutting off all connection. The black Rolls-Royce drove away without hesitation. I stood there alone. The slightly cool night wind blew, and I shivered. In a past life, after I married Alan, Felix reminded me more than once that he was ambitious and to be cautious. And no matter what he said, I didn't believe him. I even sneered at him, mocking, "Aren't you just jealous of Alan, jealous that he came from a humble background but now stands at a higher position than you? You, a hypocrite spouting endless lies, I won't believe a single word you say." At that moment, Felix stood in front of me, dressed in a neatly tailored suit, but his eyes revealed a deeply wounded expression. When I came back to my senses, I found myself sitting in the car, instructing the driver to take us to his house. However, Felix didn't go back to the mansion or his own house. The car circled around half the city and finally stopped in front of his company building. Looking up, I saw lights still on in the top floor office. Thinking back to the sharp resistance on his face before the car windows closed, I suddenly felt a bit timid. So I bought a can of beer from a nearby convenience store, drank it all in one go to bolster my courage. As the intoxication slowly crept back, I entered the elevator and pressed the button. Felix's office was located on the 39th floor, with high privacy. But he never guarded against me. When I pushed the door open, the spacious office was empty. From the closed door of the adjacent lounge, the sound of water faintly emanated. Apart from that, there was only a light scent of lemongrass mixed with a faint hint of blood. Blood? My heart clenched and countless scenarios from past lives flashed through my mind. Without second thoughts, I pushed open the door of the adjacent lounge. And it was in the moment I opened the door. As the sound of water in the restroom of the lounge suddenly stopped, Felix, with wet hair, walked out, but halted in his tracks when our eyes met. "Winnie?" I couldn't help but let my gaze linger on him. I always knew Felix was very handsome. But most of the time, he always wore that distant expression, which created a sense of distance. However, at this moment, amidst the mist of water, the usually stern contours of his eyes and brows softened. Water droplets cascaded from the tips of his hair, following the smooth muscle lines all the way down, disappearing at the edge of the towel around his waist. The pale white skin, usually covered by his suit fabric, was now fully exposed, revealing a small mole on his waist that gleamed seductively. Apart from that, a few layers of bandages were wrapped around his left forearm, now soaked in water, faintly showing traces of blood. He was indeed injured. "Get out." Perhaps my hot gaze was too obvious. Felix closed his eyes and coldly reprimanded, though his tone lacked intimidation. Whether it was the alcohol or primal instinct, I blinked. Instead of leaving, I took a few steps inside and closed the door behind me. "You're injured," I said, stepping closer to him. "Felix, what happened?" "And your wound is bleeding again, it needs to be rebandaged." "It's just a minor injury," Felix said lightly. "I will take care of it myself, it's none of your concern." Pausing for a moment, he continued, "Winnie, you shouldn't be in my office right now, after all, you have a fiancé." I directly wrapped my arms around his neck, planting a drunken kiss that silenced his remaining words. "Don't say anything, not a word I want to hear," I mumbled somewhat incoherently. In the tangle, the warmth of our lips gradually intensified. As we stumbled, we both fell onto the nearby large bed, even the towel on our bodies getting thrown aside. After the long and deep kiss, I leaned on Felix's shoulders, gasping for breath incessantly. Seeing the intense desire in his eyes but still struggling, I found it somewhat difficult to speak. Is it for him again this time? Of course, it's for myself. The alcohol and the kiss had made my mind a mess, and some words slipped out without thought. I teased the fingertips damp with water droplets, intentionally or unintentionally stroking the pale white skin, revealing two faint blushes amidst the misty water vapors. I was pleased to see Felix's Adam's apple move violently twice, then he grabbed my hand. "And since I turned 18, I've been thinking about this," I continued, "about you, Felix, it can only be you." There was a moment of silence in the air. Then everything turned upside down. The whole world seemed chaotic, with just the two of us. The remaining water droplets evaporated quickly due to the elevated body temperature. The lights on the ceiling swayed, like a small boat thrown into a stormy sea, just like us. Soon, all that was left was the hurried gasping for breath. Inexplicably, I thought of when I was 18. I remembered the night after the college entrance exam when I got drunk, hiding on the balcony to secretly kiss Felix. No matter how I coaxed and flirted, he only agreed to kiss me. "Winnie, you're still young," he whispered in my ear, his warm body radiating patience. "I always want to give you the opportunity to change your mind. Now, Felix." I uttered just 2 words, but was startled by the hoarseness of my voice. Felix paused for a moment, then looked down at me with misty emotions enveloping his eyes, only to quickly disperse. After a moment, he lifted his hand and covered my eyes. "There's no chance to change your mind this time, Winnie." Outside the glass window, the heavy rain poured down at some point. Inside the lounge, the damp mist rose along with the light. Felix pressed on the most sensitive part of my lower back, sometimes gently, sometimes firmly, his voice husky and low. "Winnie, don't hide. Feel me well." I thought about the wound on his arm, a bit worried, wanting to prop myself up to check it. But the suddenly intensified force hit me and swallowed back all words. "I told you, it's just a small injury." Felix's long fingers curled around a strand of my sweaty hair. His usual cold eyes seemed to crack open a gap, revealing the buried madness deep inside. "There's still a lot of time, Winnie, don't be so nervous." The fresh scent of lemongrass gradually mixed with the scent on my body, along with the smell of alcohol. At a certain moment, they blended together and overflowed. At 4 a.m, dragging my weak body on the carpet, almost unable to stand steady, Felix hooked my waist with his uninjured arm and pulled me closer. "You should rest, Winnie." I made an effort to turn my head to look at him, "But your wound really needs to be rebandaged, and also, how did you get injured in the first place?" Felix suddenly fell silent. In the suffocating silence, I suddenly realized, "Do you think I'm now trying to find out about you from Alan?" He stared straight at me, obviously agreeing. I felt a little sad, a little angry. "We've been through this before," I said. "I was just worried you were in danger, so I asked Alan about their plans to deal with you." "Why can't you trust me? I trusted you." Felix's voice was soft. "I have trusted you many times over these 2 years, Winnie." Suddenly my throat felt blocked by something. I blinked my slightly bitter eyes and heard him continue, "But whether to believe or not, it doesn't matter anymore. From now on, no matter how eloquent you are, I won't let you go again. As for that Alan, he's not as simple as you think." I blurted out. Seeing Felix's slight frown, I couldn't help but take a deep breath. "If I told you that in my past life, I died by his hands, would you believe me?" Rain hammered against the window outside, dark and moonless. Inside, under the ambiguous light, Felix opposite me seemed to have frozen. "Past life? Felix, have you ever thought that we are actually characters in a book?" Hesitating for a moment, thinking of the terrifying power of the original plot, I decided to tell Felix everything. I don't know if it was a dream or a real past life. In any case, from the moment Alan appeared in the previous life, it seemed like my eyes could only see him suddenly. When I narrated the 10 years of the past life in detail, the rain outside had already stopped. The horizon was casting a pale golden glow. The last project, which cost my parents their lives and allowed Alan to successfully swallow our entire family's fortune. He said he hated me because he had endured unimaginable humiliation by my side over the past 10 years. After that, he used the excuse that I had suffered too much and had a mental breakdown to send me to a mental hospital. At this point, I suddenly choked up. Even after all this time had passed, everything had started over again. That half year in the mental hospital remained a nightmare to me. Being bound hand and foot every day, forced injections of excessive doses of medication. My brain was in a fog, with hardly any moments of clarity. And having to endure the excruciating pain of regular electric shocks. So later, when I finally regained consciousness, I escaped from the ward and jumped off the hospital rooftop. With a slightly shaky tone, I was engulfed in Felix's sudden embrace and warmth. It was just a dream. I won't let such a thing happen. Yes, you won't. I closed my eyes in his arms. In front of me, it seemed like the fiery scene from that wedding day reappeared, so even though you couldn't overcome the power of the original plot in the dream, unable to save me, at the happiest moment of Alan's life, I sent him to hell. The familiar scent from Felix's body and the drowsiness brought by a sleepless night quickly sent me into a deep sleep. In my dream, it seemed like I had returned to the past life. Those 10 years of turmoil between me and Felix, seeing each other in public, attacking him with the most vicious words, suppressing him at all costs. Yet, he still wore the fragrance of lemongrass. When I was alive, I hated him to the extreme, never cared. It wasn't until the moment I watched him consumed by flames that I suddenly understood. Because that was the 18-year-old Winnie. The Winnie before meeting Alan. The last gift to Felix. The first thing I did after waking up was to take Felix to the hospital to rebandage his wound. No water contact, do not exert force on this arm for the next 7 days. After the doctor's serious instructions, we could leave. Sitting in the car, I turned to Felix and asked, "Can you tell me how you got injured now?" In the dim light of the car, he gazed into my eyes, sighed softly. Actually, it happened when I was on a site visit for the project construction. I suddenly bit my lip. Is it related to Alan? Felix's warm fingertip flicked over, parted my teeth and lips, and soothingly rubbed my lip. Don't worry. The only way he can hurt me is through you. So, you just need to stay away from him a bit, leave the rest to me. But I don't want that. I grabbed his teasing finger with a serious expression. Felix, I'm someone who has died once, in a way, I'm older than you now. Whatever you plan to do, how you deal with Alan, let me know, can you? He paused for a moment and responded quietly, okay. Winnie, I won't interfere with your decisions. But, try to keep away from Alan as much as possible. I nodded, suddenly feeling like teasing him. Are you afraid I'll be charmed by Alan again? Felix nodded calmly. Behind his lowered eyelashes, a hint of vulnerability flashed, one he couldn't conceal well. Even Felix, who had gradually taken over the company at the age of 16 and experienced a seat in the business world, felt afraid. I held Felix's face in my hands and said seriously, Felix, we've known each other since the day I was born. When I was sickly as a child and stayed in the hospital, you came every day with a bouquet of flowers and comic books to visit me. When I had my first period at 14, you went to buy sanitary pads for me. After we stole our first kiss at 18, I've been dreaming about you ever since. Without the forced brainwashing of the original plot, I wouldn't have looked at Alan twice. I have always loved you, only you. That sentence felt like a key that suddenly opened Pandora's box. As the blinds rose and in the well-insulated, secluded space, Felix suddenly reached out and grabbed the back of my head, kissing me forcefully. The kiss was intense, with a tingling sensation on our lips, and even my tongue felt numb from the suction. I felt weak all over, burning hot, sitting on his lap, sliding down uncontrollably. I had crumpled his crisp suit shirt front, then suddenly remembered the doctor's instructions. Wait, your wound, you can't exert force on it. Felix pulled me back with his uninjured hand, sitting me upright on his lap. Because of Winnie's exertion, the thigh muscles enclosed in the snug trousers tightened, feeling scorching hot to the touch. I swayed and instinctively grabbed his leg. Felix let out a soft grunt, his voice hoarse. It felt as though there was a fiercely burning fire in front of his fingertips. My sanity was instantly burned to ashes. My hand inching forward, at the moment it touched the flames, Felix's hoarse voice, tinged with restrained desire, echoed in my ear. It's up to you now, Winnie. Show me the dreams you've had about me. After that day, Alan didn't contact me for a long time. I inquired around the hospital and found out that, leveraging some connection, he had arranged for another oncologist to perform surgery on his mother. Approaching graduation, I joined the internship at our family's company ahead of time. Because our families had maintained a long-standing cooperation with Felix, I had more opportunities to interact with him. I planned to visit Alan's studio later. Sitting across from Felix, I took a bite of my bagel and said, following the previous timeline, by now, you and I should have had a falling out, and I would have started using the resources at home to help Alan expand his network, taking away a significant project from you. Felix suddenly looked up at me. Beneath his long eyelashes, the emotions in his eyes were transparent. I quickly added, I'm just going to probe to see how far his current plan has progressed. Wait for me to come home for dinner tonight. Alan's studio was not far from the city center. If not for my wholehearted assistance initially, he wouldn't have been able to afford this place. When I entered, I saw Stella sitting in front of his desk. Alan stood behind her, leaning down, in a highly ambiguous posture. He almost enveloped her entirely in his arms. It was the same as before. I had long noticed the abnormal intimacy between him and Stella, but Alan refused to acknowledge it. I had many heated arguments with him over this, each time turning into a huge confrontation. I would get hysterical to the point of madness, and Alan would just stand by, looking at me with bored eyes. Later, all of this became evidence that I had oppressed and humiliated him. Coming back to reality, I coldly asked, "What are you two doing?" The two in front of me seemed to freeze suddenly. After a moment, Alan straightened up, straightened his slightly wrinkled clothes. He looked at me and said to Stella, "You can leave first." Stella gave me a displeased look and left. Only the two of us were left in the room. Alan put on that cold expression again and said, "Didn't you leave with Felix? Why have you come to me?" He tried to manipulate me using his old ways. If it were the Winnie controlled by the original plot, she would have apologized and said she only loved him at this point. She would then try all means to help his studio, proving that there were some things only she could provide him with. I lifted my chin slightly and said, "Recently, there's a project at our family's company that was supposed to collaborate with Felix's company, but I want to choose you." Alan suddenly looked up at me, his Adam's apple moving. I smirked and said, "But the project has a long timeline and huge financial implications. I need to first determine how much you can handle." When I got home in the evening, combining the previous plot with what I had learned, I told Felix what I had found out. I suspected that due to my rebirth, the plot had advanced, and Alan had already gotten involved with the mob boss David. In the previous life, he didn't meet that person until several years later. As I realized this, I furrowed my brows slightly. Felix, who had been going through the contract, paused for a moment and looked at me. That's because Peter can no longer help him. I was taken aback. Back then, with that project, they had inserted a mole in the subsidiary, stolen accounts, and falsified records. Now Peter and his men were in prison. He flipped through the papers in his hand and spoke in the same calm tone. "Alan's company is still in its infancy, he's too weak and can only rely on others." I suddenly realized this was orchestrated by you. Felix did not argue and seemed to tacitly agree. I blinked and threw myself into his arms. "Felix, you are amazing." He caught me with hands that were teasingly wandering around and suddenly changed to a serious expression. "Winnie, you shouldn't be involved in what's coming next." "Why not?" "It's very dangerous," he said, slightly furrowing his brow. "Alan's identity is not as simple as you think. Otherwise, David wouldn't have agreed to cooperate with him so readily." I was suddenly dumbfounded. "You mean, in my past life, I chose to perish with them in the most tragic way?" Felix's tone remained calm, but with a trace of coldness, probably because, other than this, there was no other way left for me. That night, I had another dream. I dreamed of the 6th year of my marriage with Alan in my past life, at a certain banquet. I saw him standing intimately with David's daughter, Cindy. And inexplicably, I became insanely jealous. Losing my rationality, I sent someone to kidnap Cindy, but ended up being taken away by David's men. A cold knife was placed against my neck, then traveled down the line of my body. I thought I was going to die there. Finally, Alan, looking indifferent, entered and took me away from the gang. Because of this, in my past life, I always believed that he was just a bit cold on the surface, but still had feelings for me. However, in this dream, like a sudden switch in a movie scene, I saw another room where Scarface David sat with Felix, who had an expressionless face beside him. In front of them was a large screen frozen at the moment where the knife was against my neck. David chuckled softly. "So, Felix, have you considered our cooperation?" Felix looked at my tear-streaked face with his beautiful eyes, without changing his expression. After a few seconds, he looked away. "I agree. Let Winnie leave safely." David smiled satisfactorily. "You are a smart person. It's a pity. If you had agreed to become my son-in-law, we would have become a family." Felix distantly said, "No need." After he left, Alan and Cindy came in. Cindy sighed, slightly disappointed. "Dad, did Felix agree to cooperate with us?" David nodded. "He's got a terrible taste. Preferring that stupid Winnie over marrying me." She smiled and turned to Alan. "When will you divorce this idiot and marry Stella?" I suddenly opened my eyes. It was pitch dark, with only a ray of moonlight coming in through the window. The scenes from the dream lingered in my mind, piecing together with the other information I knew, quickly revealing the hidden information beneath the surface. Winnie. I moved slightly and was immediately embraced by Felix. He held me quietly for a few seconds, then spoke with concern. "You're shaking." "I know." I closed my eyes, feeling his familiar crisp scent. "I know, Felix. Alan is David's illegitimate son. David agreed to cooperate with him now because they have acknowledged their father-son relationship. Felix didn't care about Alan's true identity. He just held me tighter." "What did you dream about?" I wrapped my arms around his narrow waist and choked. "I'm sorry." "I'm sorry, Felix." I finally understood that in my past life, under the manipulation of Alan and his real father, I had become a hostage threatening Felix. The company's industry was stained with unspeakable darkness. So in the end, Felix chose to perish with everyone at that grand wedding. Fortunately, in this life, I woke up from the shackles of the original storyline. There was still time. When my emotions calmed down, I recounted the dream scenes. Felix's hand behind me suddenly tightened, his voice carrying an icy chill. "Cindy, right? I understand now." Guided by me, the company quickly reached an agreement with Alan's studio on a project. David also got involved. At that time, it was still early. He hadn't yet dominated the whole city like in the past life. So, during the project, there were many unfinished flaws left behind. Felix collected all of these, which would serve as evidence to put him on trial in the future. However, Felix had not contacted me in the past few days. That afternoon, I went to his company to find him and downstairs discovered a bright pink sports car. The door opened and a familiar figure walked out. I froze suddenly. It was Cindy, a few years younger. I saw her walk briskly to the other side and open the door. Then, Felix in his suit came out, with a faint smile on his lips. I didn't know what he said, but Cindy laughed, took out something resembling a letter from her bag, and handed it to him. Then she got into the car and left. Felix stood still, looking around. When he passed by my car, he hesitated. I was sure that he recognized me. But he acted as if he hadn't seen anything, calmly turned his gaze, and went upstairs. Suddenly, a boundless sourness filled my heart. Was this the same feeling Felix had whenever he saw me with Alan countless times before? I pushed open the car door and went upstairs to find Felix in the office. He looked up from behind the desk. "Why didn't you knock?" I sourly replied, "Does Cindy need to knock when she comes to see you?" Felix was silent for a moment, then suddenly stood up and walked towards the lounge area. As he walked, he loosened his tie and unbuttoned 2 buttons of his shirt collar. Standing in the lounge with his collar half open, he looked at me and said, "Come here." I deliberately dragged my feet a bit, slowly walked over, and just as I entered the lounge, the door suddenly closed behind me. My back pressed against the hard, cold door panel, but all I could feel in front of me was Felix's burning body heat. He held onto my shoulders, his wet kisses with traces of water spreading from his lips to my ear and then tracing down his body. Felix knew me too well, including my reactions, the limits I could endure, the meaning behind every shiver of my body. I felt like I was thrown high into the clouds, then suddenly plummeted into an endless sea. Felix. I managed to whisper shakily, only to be thrown back into the boundless ocean of ecstasy. Before I was completely engulfed by the waves, I heard his hoarse voice, filled with a scorching breath, close to my ear. Are you satisfied now? I still belong to you completely. I flipped through the letter that Cindy had handed to Felix. It turned out to be an invitation to her birthday banquet. As the main person in charge of the cooperative project, I had also received one. It would be dangerous that day, and I was inclined to not go. Felix, with his translucent eyes, looked at me and asked, "But will you listen to me, Winnie?" I shook my head honestly, no. Then hurriedly added, "Because normally, we are currently working on our project smoothly. If I suddenly don't attend the banquet, it might raise suspicion." This reason was convincing, even Felix couldn't argue against it. He looked at me intently for a moment, then leaned over and kissed me again, whispering, "Whatever happens, Winnie, remember. Your safety comes first." Soon, it was the day of Cindy's birthday banquet. Our company's project was actually in cooperation with the authorities, so there were many influential people present. And as one of the three parties cooperating, Alan had successfully made a lot of connections. I held a glass of wine, watching Stella follow behind him. As if sensing my gaze, she suddenly turned around, looked at me with a provocative expression. Then, as if in a display of defiance, she linked her arm with Alan's. Scanning the room, I recognized many familiar faces among the guests. These were the collaborators Alan was supposed to meet in a few years from now. Was everything happening ahead of schedule because of Felix's intervention? Just as I began to have some insights, the protagonist of the banquet, Cindy, appeared. She was holding David's arm on one side, with Felix standing on the other side, wearing a gentle smile. "Welcome, everyone, to my birthday banquet." She spoke with a beaming smile, her gaze sweeping across my face with a hint of satisfaction. A waiter brought out a huge 3-tiered cake. She cut the cake, and with Felix by her side, she quickly went to greet the guests, eventually coming over to me. "Winnie, I hope we have a pleasant cooperation in the upcoming projects." Cindy smiled at me, then suddenly turned to Felix and asked, "I heard that you and Winnie used to be very close, even made a childhood promise?" "It was just a joke from my parents, nothing serious." Felix's gaze swept past me blandly, then moved away indifferently. "Besides, Winnie is already committed. We have no relationship now." Even though I knew he was just acting, I still clenched my teeth. It took me a while before I sneered, "I should thank Felix for finally letting me go." He left with Cindy. I raised my glass and quickly found Alan near the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the garden. He was on the phone, and Stella was nowhere to be seen. I didn't know what the person on the other end of the line was saying, but his expression gradually became solemn. Outside the window, in the pitch-black night, the first fireworks bloomed. It was supposed to be fireworks celebrating Cindy's birthday, but it perfectly masked the sounds of gunfire from the fierce battle that broke out not far away when the gang's secret arsenal was discovered. Remembering Felix's earlier instructions, I discreetly stepped back into a corner. Just as I was about to leave the garden path, a figure covered in blood suddenly rushed towards the gate. "Boss, our deal has been discovered." A gunshot rang out, and a huge crystal chandelier crashed to the ground, making a deafening sound. The whole hall plunged into darkness in an instant. Chaos ensued. Afraid of getting caught in the crossfire, I obediently hid in a corner and watched as the police officers who had infiltrated the banquet subdued one of David's men after another. "Winnie." Finally, Felix's voice rang in my ear. He approached me in the concealment of darkness and whispered, "David's influence is deeply rooted after all these years. There may be more surprises coming, we need to leave now." I nodded, feeling the tension in my heart gradually easing. However, just as we managed to escape the chaotic crowd and reach the garden, a night breeze carrying a strange mix of floral scents blew over, and I suddenly caught a scent that was out of the ordinary. Like a premonition from a past life, my pupils contracted, and I swiftly tackled Felix to the ground, rolling away to the side. The next moment, right where we were supposed to be, a flurry of bullets kicked up clouds of dust. I staggered to my feet, only to find the dark barrel of a gun aimed at me. "It's really you." Alan held the gun, looking at me with an almost hateful gaze. "If you claim to love me, why do you keep sabotaging my career opportunities? If you truly admire me, you should be willing to give to me unconditionally. But instead, you only look down on me with pity, treating me as inferior. Winnie, you truly disgust me." Even if I were to live again, Alan's shameless words left me speechless. No matter how good I was to him in the past, no matter how much effort I put into helping him, he still saw it as an insult. From the depths of his heart, he believed that any help I provided him should come without expectations. Angered by his absurd logic, I couldn't help but retort, "We don't even know each other. I offered you help, you should thank me. If you feel insulted, throw the money in my face, tell me you can succeed without my dirty money. But you can't. The truth is, even though you've gotten involved with David, you still need my connections to collaborate with the company to secure the projects you desire. Without my help, you are just a worthless nobody." The more I spoke, the paler Alan's face became. But he gritted his teeth and said, "You, born into a life of luxury and privilege, you simply don't understand. It has nothing to do with your background." Felix suddenly chuckled, interrupting Alan, "All you do is shift blame, play the victim. Even if you were born into our family, nothing would change. Just like now, you've acknowledged your father, yet you're still nothing but a useless person who trades on her looks for opportunities." His gaze was contemptuous, barely concealed yet guarding against something. In the instant Alan lost his composure and fired the gun, Felix pushed me aside. Gunshots rang out. Bullets pierced flesh, creating a bloodbath enveloped in smoke. A few warm drops of blood splattered on my face. All I could see was a sea of red, and his eyes slowly closing. Felix, in the hospital room, the overpowering scent of disinfectant masked the lemongrass aroma on Felix. Sitting by his bedside, I gritted my teeth and said, "Are you out of your mind?" His eyelashes fluttered, and he looked at me with gentle eyes. "Sorry, Winnie, I just wanted to conduct an experiment." After all the efforts we made to break free from that inevitable force, would the outcome from your past life repeat itself? This was why he deliberately provoked Alan, prompting him to shoot at himself. In reality, the plainclothes police had noticed the missing figures in the chaotic hall and followed them outside. At the same moment Alan shot, they pulled their triggers too, hitting his wrist and temple. If they couldn't break free from the original script's influence, Felix would have undoubtedly died at Alan's hands. But as it turned out, due to the successful deviation of the gun barrel, he only suffered a shoulder injury. Don't you have plenty of other ways to challenge fate that don't involve risking your life? It's the safest bet. His lips were as white as paper from blood loss, but his eyes never wavered from mine. If I truly died, Alan would undoubtedly face the death penalty. You would have no contact with him, no stint in a mental institution. For the next few decades, you would have a peaceful life, Winnie. He paused for a moment, lowering his voice even further. Like a feather softly landing in my ears, but carrying the force of a thunderbolt, he said, "I told you, I won't let the nightmare you had in your dreams become reality." I stared at Felix blankly, my throat as if constricted by invisible forces, unable to utter a word. He was truly a bit unhinged, willing to bet his life on this gamble. If he won, it would show that we had both escaped the shadows of our past lives. If he lost, his death could buy me a lifetime of peace. I thought of the injections from my past life, of falling from a high-rise building. I thought of Felix's tearful gaze in the dimly lit room. I thought of the flames erupting at Alan's grand wedding. I thought of the lemongrass scent that clung to Felix for over a decade. In the surging tears, I suddenly grabbed his lapel tightly, leaned in, and viciously bit his lips. The sweet, bloody taste filled my mouth. "That's no good," I said word by word. "Your life is mine." "Okay, I'm yours." The originally cold and indifferent eyes of Felix were now filled with a kind of moist tenderness. "Everything about me belongs to you." During those days, Felix found a way to get close to Cindy to gather intelligence from her. Cooperating with the police, they disrupted a weapons deal involving over $1 billion. Due to charges of involvement in criminal activities, intentional murder, illegal possession of firearms, Alan, David, Cindy, and others were sentenced to death. All the guests at the birthday dinner and David's covert network were gradually investigated. Stella, although not directly involved in the case, also received a 2-year sentence for providing some assistance. Our company's next phases of Projects 2 and 3 continued to collaborate with Felix as a matter of course. Under the guise of work, I suddenly found myself spending a lot more time with Felix. But no matter how he tried to seduce me, I always refused with a straight face. "Your wound hasn't healed yet. We'll talk when it's fully healed." After saying that, I couldn't help but scold him. "You dare to drink alcohol with your gunshot wound still not healed? Do you not cherish your life?" The white shirt soaked with hot water was clinging to his body, and Felix opened his eyes. The pupils still retained a trace of haziness from intoxication. A smile of indulgence mixed with helplessness curved his lips. "I'm sorry, Winnie." I swallowed and, pretending to be indifferent, tossed the shower head to him. "Undress yourself, take a bath, I'll leave first." In the steam-filled bathroom, I had only taken a few steps when suddenly there was the sound of something heavy falling behind me. After hesitating for a moment, my worry for Felix took over. I turned around and walked back quickly. As I leaned over, he grabbed my neck and we both fell into the large circular bathtub. I couldn't help but scream, "The haute couture dress I just received last week, I'll compensate you with 10 outfits tomorrow." His scorching breath was near my ear, gradually becoming hotter. "Winnie, help me." That kiss lingered on my lips, entwining and lingering until a faint soreness came, and then reluctantly parted. But it carried warmth, descending all the way down, sinking beneath the surface of the water. "How can I help you?" The abrupt high-pitched trembling tail sound was swallowed up by the scorching kisses. "It's too hot, help me cool down." I couldn't help cool him down. I could only be led by him, and we fell into a damp tropical rainforest together. And then suddenly, a downpour. With a slightly cool touch, flowing into the depths of the river. After tossing and turning until late at night, I finally fell into a deep sleep. In a hazy state, I actually dreamt. In the dream, I couldn't tell if it was in a past life or this one. Because that was the moment before Alan appeared. I was wearing a high school uniform and found a love letter written by a boy in my school bag. Then, like a movie scene, the picture shifted. It was the boy standing among a few thugs, smoking, with malice in his eyes. "So what if she's a rich girl? Once I trick her into going out on a date, drugging her drink, we can do whatever we want." The next day, he was hit by a speeding car on his way to school, breaking his leg. In the pale hospital room. Felix pushed the door open and looked at him expressionlessly. "This is a warning. If there are any more thoughts that shouldn't belong, next time it breaks, who knows what it will be." Then the hospital door closed. He answered the phone. On the other end, there was the arrogant voice of 17-year-old Winnie. "Felix, my birthday is coming soon. What gift have you prepared for me? If it's something I don't like, don't expect me to go on a field trip with you next month." Felix smiled, his tone full of indulgence. "It's already on your desk. You can see it when you get back from school." Outside the hospital corridor windows, the sun was shining, cherry blossoms blooming. The gentle breeze carried pale pink petals lazily blowing by. It was the springtime when everything was about to begin.